Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Spiritual Survival Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Brown. Our team's mission is to help you have eyes to see the times we are living in. Take unprecedented measures to prepare yourself spiritually for the events that will precede the second coming of Jesus Christ. If the mission of our podcast resonates with you, please click subscribe, like, and share this content. Welcome back to part 2. We want to move a little bit forward from Elder Bednar's comments on the power of godliness and talk about this first level of this change, this mighty change that takes place as we tune into these spiritual frequencies. In John chapter 3, it talks about this experience called being born again. Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus saith unto him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I say unto thee, ye must be born again. The wind bloweth whither it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, and whither it goeth. So is everyone that is born of the Spirit. So I've had a number of friends that have kind of expressed this, experiencing this change, this quickening, this power of godliness coming into their lives. And it's interesting how, for most of them, it began with a commitment to really increase their temple attendance. To better understand this, I think it helps to understand that we live in a world where there's actually two worlds coexisting. There's a physical realm, the one that we can touch and see, and it can be sensed by our physical senses. And then there's a spiritual realm that coexists, but it's out of tune with our physical senses. And so before we can actually experience these things of the spiritual realm, a change has to take place in us. I think this is, what we've been talking about, this power of godliness, this greater degrees or frequencies of the light of Christ. And it actually causes a change in us that's so fundamental and far-reaching that it can best be described as new birth. And the way we tune into this is to begin to have spiritual eyes to see and spiritual ears to hear, and a heart to understand. And these things come by actually expanding our belief system, breaking out of these veils of unbelief or precepts of men that maybe we've bought into, and to dive a little bit deeper into this. Something I've learned recently is that there's almost unlimited space within matter. And you're probably wondering why I'm saying this, but you'll see in a minute. For instance, an atom. Everything's made out of atoms and molecules, but an atom itself is actually more space than it is matter. It's almost like a tiny solar system. And even though there's more space than there is matter, there are forces at work. There's unseen forces that have unspeakable power. And so you may be saying, Randy, if that's true, why can't I just walk through this wall why can't my arm just pass through, this chair? It's because when I reach out to touch this chair and there's a collision, it's not a collision of particles so much as it is a collision of forces. And without those forces, we could pass through anything in this physical world. And that's because our physical bodies are in tune with those forces here in the physical world. We could say that those forces resonate. So again, there are two worlds coexisting here, occupying the same space at the same time. Each one is just as real as the other, and one world can pass through the other because they're not in tune, or we could say they don't resonate. And neither world is conscious really of the other one. We could say that the forces of these atoms within these two worlds, maybe atoms isn't the right word, but the forces between these two worlds are not mutually interactive. So I want to share an old science video that I came across years ago that I think explains this pretty well.
Two pieces of steel. Their appearance is quite similar, but a magnet will reveal a basic internal difference between the two pieces. This one, of course, is picked up, but this one is unaffected. This piece of steel is non-magnetic, stainless steel. Of course, we all know that other metals, such as brass or aluminum, are not affected by the magnet. But a ring made of aluminum is something else. It can be suspended in air by the electromagnetic force of what is actually a transformer. The ring being in effect a one-turn shorted secondary.
Because the ring is in tune with the forces at work here, it can be acted upon. It can, in this example, it was able to, great force caused it to rise up. And maybe that could be similar to in the spiritual realm. If we are in tune with these spiritual forces, the powers of godliness, the light of Christ, we can rise up very quickly and, be born again at higher levels.
A smaller ring will react even more violently.
We see examples in the Book of Mormon of people who were converted so powerfully and so quickly that their spiritual ascension took place very rapidly.
Here is another ring. This one made of a material we say is non-conductive. And it is completely unaffected.
And we see others who, because of being out of tune with spiritual things, no conversion took place. They remained unaffected. Perhaps Laman and Lemuel would be an example of that.
Here is another example. Several thousand watts of power were involved in that spark. If we replace the spark gap with a copper coil, the same power now flows through the coil. It's invisible, has no effect on many substances, but it can generate a lot of heat. Wood, paper, things that we think of as being quite inflammable are not affected at all. However, a piece of steel wool bursts into flame instantly.
That might be an example of someone who was lit up very quickly by the light of Christ with the power of godliness because of being in tune with those frequencies.
Did you ever fry an egg on a coal stove? It's no trick at all if you have the right equipment. This is a cold hot plate, and because it's cold, you can make it out of wood, if you like. Just be sure that there's a coil of wire inside and that you connect that coil to a high voltage alternating current source. The rest is easy. As long as we're being different, we'll use motor oil instead of Crisco. The egg fries very quickly, but the stove remains perfectly cold. In fact, if you wish to keep it handy, you can fry your egg on the morning newspaper. With a gadget like this, you can get up in the morning, sit on the stove, read the morning newspaper, and fry the eggs in your lap. Another example of the fact that physical forces can be quite selective in their effect. All of the examples which we have cited thus far have been in the physical realm, and of course have been limited by that fact.
So we could say that this egg experienced a mighty change because of this frequency or this power, this unseen power that was able to work upon it and change it because they were in tune or they resonated, where it really had no effect on the piece of wood that remained cold. So in the creation account that we have in the temple or even in the book of Genesis, we know that, in the beginning, God and man coexisted in perfect harmony. They were in tune, they resonated. And so these two worlds were one. And then when Adam and Eve partook of the fruit, something happened. They fell. There was a change of frequency where they were separated from this power and this light that caused them to be in tune. And some type of a barrier, we could say a veil, an invisible veil that is very real, was placed between God and man. And in many ways, this veil was a protection from this astronomically powerful force or frequency that would actually be lethal to a fallen man in a natural state. But we know because of Jesus Christ, he became flesh and he dwelt among us. And he didn't, all of a sudden just remove this barrier between us and God, but he actually became flesh and blood, and he stepped across this barrier and provided a way for us by the use of our agency to cross that barrier and return to him and the Father. And so we know on the third day after his crucifixion that he rose from the dead. And very interesting what happened on this day. And I'm going to share this account from John chapter 20. It says, "The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter, and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saith unto him, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple," that would be John, "and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple, who's John, did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he stooping down, looking in, saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in." And I've highlighted those words, "saw the linen clothes lying." We're gonna dive into that here in a second. And then in verse 6, "Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes lie." So both of them, John and Peter, saw something that we often don't talk about, and that's they saw the linen clothes. And we're going to talk about what those linen clothes were and what that means. And then in verse 7, "And the napkin that was about his head was not lying within the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also that other disciple, which was John, which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed." So I often had, I guess most of my life, I'd thought that Mary was the first actual witness of the resurrection. But this seems to indicate that John and Peter actually were. And I want to dive into that a little bit. So it says that he saw and believed. So what did he believe? He believed that Jesus Christ was risen from the dead. And that's really what an apostle is. An apostle is a special witness of the resurrected Savior. Um, what did John see and what did Peter see that made them believe? Was it just the empty tomb? I don't think so, because Mary saw the empty tomb, and all she thought was that someone had come and stolen his body. But what they actually saw was this miracle of the undisturbed grave clothes. So to to better understand that, we have to realize that at the time of Jesus, when they buried someone, and they had a tradition of wrapping them like a mummy, and so Jesus was actually wrapped in a wrapping tight, um, and that when he rose with a spiritual body that was out of tune with the material substance of these grave clothes. And what happened was this wrapping, this mummy wrapping, actually just kind of sunk down and became hollow and empty. And so the stone being rolled away from the sepulcher was not to let Christ out. He didn't need that. But the stone being rolled away was actually to let the disciples in so that they could see and believe, so they could become eyewitnesses with their physical eyes. Later that day, Christ appeared to his disciples. They were in a locked room, um, and all of a sudden Christ appeared in the room. How did he get there? Well, the same way that he vanished from his grave clothes, he was now out of tune with this physical realm. Meaning, he could pass right through walls, he could pass through these grave clothes. And so the miracle was not that Christ could walk through a wall as much as it was because we know he had a spiritual body that was operating at higher laws or higher frequencies, or we might even say the power of God in great glory was upon him. The miracle, that day was that these disciples with purely physical eyes would be able to see him. And so that's what it means that Christ was out of tune with his grave clothes. This is the phenomenon of resonance. um, forces matching up, or the lack thereof, where things can pass right through. And so there are two reasons why we need the power of godliness, why we need these higher frequencies of light and power to come into our lives. Number one is that we're out of tune, or we're out of harmony with God in a fallen state, and we're separated from him by these invisible forces that we would maybe call veils. And not only are we out of tune with heaven, with things of higher dimensions, higher degrees of glory, but we're in tune with the judgments of a righteous God upon sin. And so this frequency, this state that we're in, has to be overcome. We have to be reborn. We have to be infused with light and power that causes a change in us. So when Christ said, "You must be born again," it wasn't just an idle statement. It was actually a statement of profound significance, and it's the deepest need of the human soul. And how fortunate we are to have the restored gospel and to have these restored priesthood ordinances, and that in these ordinances the power of godliness is manifest. Just living a good life is not enough. That we can't earn this. It's something that we have to tune into and receive. And as we do, this basic change takes place in us. It changes our nature, it changes our thinking, and eventually, our bodies, the material substance of our bodies, will be quickened as well. And again, this is so profound and so significant that God refers to this as new birth. So in the book of Isaiah, he talks about these different spiritual levels. In a celestial world, Isaiah talks about two different levels of people in the celestial. And one is the Babylon category, which are people that are just totally, uh, totally enthralled in idolatry and worldliness, and um, only the things that their eyes can see and senses can can sense. There's also a Jacob Israel category that's kind of maybe has trying to have feet in both worlds. Um, Perhaps they believe in God, but have not yet had this experience with the power of godliness, or experienced this mighty change that can take place by tuning in and inviting these higher and holier frequencies into their lives that are transformational. Um, Jacob had an experience where he was changed. He saw the ladder to heaven, and he got a new name, Israel, because it reflected his new birth. And he was reborn into a terrestrial level, which we could say is a Zion level. And for us to survive into the millennium, we need this kind of change. We need to be a Zion people, at a new level where we've had a remission of sins. The desire to sin's been removed. Um, we are in a righteous state, and eventually that Jacob Israel category is going to disappear. Either those people will descend into a Babylon state, or they'll take Isaiah's invitation and awake and arise and be born at this higher level. And then eventually the earth will be cleansed. And that's why we need this level of change, because before the millennium, the Babylon category, this celestial level, will be cleansed from the earth, because the earth is being reborn as well. And so we need to have this power of God in great glory, or this be armed with righteousness, and then have the power of God in great glory help us to ascend to even higher levels. So I want to show one more science video, if you guys can bear with me. But it makes the point that I'm trying to get across here, I hope.
By taking a goblet from the table, and then he would sing across the open end with that magnificent voice of his, and the glass would shatter. Now, I'm no Caruso, but it's not difficult to duplicate this feat here in the laboratory. That is, if we use an electronic voice. The trick is to find the one note that will break the glass. We can determine this by placing a coin in the glass and then tuning the frequency until resonance is reached. At this frequency, if we bring the glass into the direct sound beam, it shatters instantly.
So again, we see that by tuning to the proper frequency, this glass entered into resonance, and a mighty change took place upon it. I just want to bear my testimony that is just as real at a spiritual level, even though it's a higher and holier level. And I know these science experiences are kind of my feeble attempt to illustrate this.
The sound becomes a very real thing when it is in tune with the glass. Did you ever get a good solid electrical shock? Ordinary house current is 60-cycle alternating current. When you stick your thumb up a light socket, that's where you rattle. You're in tune. Let's take another look at that 1,000,000 volts. That was well over 1,000,000 volts with a lot of power behind it. If that were 60-cycle alternating current and the charge should go through my body to ground, there's no question as to the result. It would be instantly fatal. But we've changed the frequency from 60 cycles to 65,000 cycles. And at this frequency, a lot of power can be taken through a human body. We use the aluminum sphere on top of the transformer merely as a discharge point for the high voltage. With the assistance of Mr. Metzger, I'm going to stand in direct contact with the transformer, permit the voltage to pass through my body and out through my fingertips. The demonstration is not an easy one, but it is one which illustrates our point in such a way that I hope you'll never forget. To be in direct contact with the transformer, I must remove my shoes. It is necessary to provide metal caps for my fingertips to prevent serious burn and to provide points of discharge for the high voltage. Power. Lights. On. Now, if there's any question in your mind about the amount of power that went through my body, I think this next demonstration will answer the question. It takes power to set a 2x4 on fire. Power. Lights. On.
So I wanted to show that because it, I think, is a good demonstration of how this power of godliness is going to have such an effect on those of us who are called to prepare the world for the second coming. That we have to be prepared. That we have to receive the power of God in great glory to such an extent that we can serve as the kings and queens of the Gentiles, which means in Isaiah's terms, ascending to this son servant level and eventually to the seraph level, where we can have power over the elements, power to go in during the darkest time the world has ever seen and rescue the elect and bring them to Zion, and to have this much power, flow through us and have it not be lethal. I think is going to be a mighty, mighty change. And this is just one verse from Isaiah that we'll kind of wrap up with. And this is from the Isaiah Institute version, translated by Avraham Gileadi. This is Isaiah 56:5. To them will I give a hand clasp and a name. And so think of the ordinances and the power that is transmitted, the frequency of power that we can receive as we tune in at these levels. To them will I give a hand clasp and a name within the walls of my house, which of course is the temple, that is better than sons and daughters. That son servant, that son daughter servant level is a celestial level. I will endow them with an everlasting name. Think of the everlasting covenant, and shall not be cut off. And so, as we discussed in our group of friends last week, how this power of God in great glory, this power of godliness that is, many of us are feeling is transforming us, is very real. It's from an unseen world that requires us to have eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to understand. But temple worship is actually, a rehearsal, or we're rehearsing these ordinances, being taught in the Spirit, learning to grow in in ascending and receiving and tuning in. Same thing with meditation, as we've talked about on this podcast, spending time in his presence, in quiet, to practice and rehearse tuning in to these frequencies and these powers. And then, of course, mighty prayer. The same thing, combining music and praise and worship and gratitude in our prayers. So thank you for being with us on this week's edition. I hope some of these science videos made a little bit of sense, and that maybe this will help you understand this process that we're in and being changed through the power of godliness. Thank you for being with us on the Spiritual Survival Podcast. Again, if the mission of our podcast resonates with you, please click subscribe, like, and share this content.